he was seen 620 foot from the top in a three-piece suit with a rolled umbrella. This was a real maverick genius. And when I did the research, what I discovered was most fascinating was the snobbery of the British. Because in 1920, well, it wouldn't have surprised you, sir. I've got a message there. The snobbery of the British. The man who was as good a climber as George Mallory was called George Finch. But unfortunately, George Finch was an Australian. What a terrible thing to be. And the British didn't want an Australian to be the first person on top of Everest. So they banned him from going. They banned him from going because he was divorced. They found that as the excuse to stop him going. Now here is the fascinating thing. The child was born, George Finch was divorced, but a child was born. There was, and the child was Peter Finch, Oscar-winning actor of Newsnight. Do you remember that film? Amazing film. So he produced an Oscar-winning son. He was an amazing man, George Finch. And so I discovered there was terrific rivalry between this Australian and this Englishman to be the first person to stand on top of Everest. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized it was a truly remarkable story. And so I spent the whole of last year writing Paths of Glory. And I hope you will enjoy it. Because although it's the first time I've ever written a story based on something that happened in the past, it was such an amazing story long before I got it that I hope you will enjoy it. And then there was a twist. This man wanted to give up everything to climb this mountain, and he fell in love. And he fell in love with the most staggeringly beautiful woman called Ruth Turner. And he courted her, and they were married within a few months of meeting. And then he was suddenly torn between whether he would ever come back to India, whether he would ever go back on to Everest, or whether he would stay with this remarkably beautiful woman. And for 6 months a year, because that's what it took in those days, to come over to India by ship to Calcutta, and then go from Calcutta to the mountain, to the base of the mountain, took 5 months. And then they only had 4 weeks in which to try before the monsoon season came to see if they can reach the top. And he did this 3 times, and on the third time, he promised his wife it would be the last time. I'll never go back to Everest again. And to prove it, I will leave your photograph on the top of the mountain, and I will return to you. In 1999, which is where the book opens, all of you will remember the finding of the body on Everest. They found the body of George Mallory. And when they took his wallet out and looked, there was no photograph of his wife. Now, if you're a romantic like me, you think that's enough to believe he made it to the top. But there are those that saw him at 625 feet to go. And all his contemporaries said, if he'd reached 625 feet, nothing on God's earth would have stopped him going. And indeed he was found, but was he on the way down, or had he turned back? This is a mystery that will probably never be solved. Now, I'm going to tell you much more, because I've otherwise you'll have the story of what happens to George Maverick. So that was Paths of Glory, and was a fascinating challenge because you have to get the facts right at a certain point, but you can be a novelist, you can be a storyteller for a lot of it, because you can invent scenes that they cannot prove didn't happen. But you can't invent scenes that they can prove didn't happen. So the heights on Everest and all those sort of things have to be accurate to an inch. And indeed, I now realize that I started a blog some years ago, and now a third of the people writing to me on a daily basis are coming from India. And I realize how seriously you write, you take the thing, because I mentioned a banknote, a 10 denominator banknote in 1924, and an Indian wrote to me and said, no, Jeffrey, we had no 10 notes in 1924, caught you out. So one's got to be very careful, because the blog is now, I've got Indians on it every day, and most of them talking about cricket, but I've got Indians on every day telling me what's going on, because the blog, which I put on all the books now, I'll tell you how exciting it is. In last month, I think they call them hits, because I don't fully understand all this stuff. I think they call them hits on a site, and I had 856,000 hits last month. So, I try to reply. They're hits. They don't all, thank God, they don't all write. They just hit. But I spend the whole of my mornings now writing back to to all of you one by one, thanking you very much indeed. So that's what I've been doing the last year. My next project, I was very touched last time I was in India by how many of you said you love the short stories. It's always the sign of a serious writing group of people or a nation that you actually love the short stories. And so my next project, I'm going to give you 12 more short stories. They'll be out in a year's time, and they will be called "And Thereby Hangs a Tale." Now, you're so well educated in this country. I had an interview, the first interview today. Charming young lady sits down from a magazine, and she said, "What's the next book called?" I said, "It's And Thereby Hangs a Tale." And she said, "The Taming of the Shrew." And I said, "Correct." Very impressed I was. So that'll be, and I thought I'd be very wicked, because Legend, where's he gone? Legend won't give him another very small round of applause. I never do it. Legend wanted me to press you very, very hard on Paths of Glory, but I thought I'd be very wicked and tell you one of the short stories. How about that? I will.